of questions for you,
Perfect.
starting off with HRV. So
Yeah,
my clients are well educated in HRV, but just from your maybe if you just gave a brief understanding for those listening don't know what the heck we're talking about, wanted to dive down a couple of rabbit holes with.
sure. Yeah, so I think that HRV as the basics is just what is the status of your autonomic nervous system? And if your autonomic nervous system has the parasympathetic side and the sympathetic side, and with that, parasympathetic is more rest and digest, sympathetic is more, I guess you could say, just stress. And HRV is telling us what balance of those two systems are we at. So for clients, I explain it to them as you're like driving your car, and if you press on the brake harder, you're increasing parasympathetic tone, but the car is actually going to slow down. If I step on the gas pedal really hard, then the car is going to accelerate. That's more like the sympathetic side of the nervous system. So you're like driving your car, and it tells us about what is that balance between the brake and the gas pedal, between rest and digest and more the stimulation stress side, fight or flight.
So obviously there's implications here for things like training, like maybe you don't want to eat a big meal while you're in the middle of your workout, right? Because those are opposing systems at play, right? So just so people understand, there's a time to be sympathetic, there's a time to be parasympathetic, right? And your HRV is really and probably the best indicator I've heard is it's really not so much your ability to perform, but your ability to recover. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say it's actually both. Can you perform at a very high level, and then can you come back down and recover sooner and get back to baseline sooner? So if you look at high level athletes, they're able to do a lot more training load, handle a lot more stress, but then they're able to take that stress, get the adaptation they need, and then get back down to a baseline or homeostasis again, so they can then further repeat the process.
Yeah, so that's where I wanted to start asking some questions that I honestly don't know what the answer to. So when we talk about heart rate variability, we're really talking about like microseconds between heartbeats, right? It's very small. So my question to you is why is it that if your HRV is low, you tend to see very rhythmic pop, not a lot of variability. What do you think is going on there in the nervous system that the nervous system being intelligent is saying, "Hey, I'm not going to be variable." What is it that the body's trying to achieve? Is it just like if you keep somebody awake for 72 hours, right? The brain will find a way to sleep. Is that what the nervous system is doing there?
Yeah, so my basis and actually the title of my PhD dissertation was fine scale variability across physiologic systems. It sounds like a bunch of just mumbo jumbo, but it's okay. So, what do we think is an emergent property of different systems in the body? So, most people, like you were saying, and this is what I thought before I looked at this, is that, oh, okay, our heart rate. Ooh, we want our heart rate to be exactly like a metronome if we're at rest, right? 70 beats a minute, 70.00, 70.00, 70.00. And what we find from the literature is that's actually a horrible idea, right? If you have that very little variation, so you have very not much heart rate variability, that actually makes you very sympathetically stressed. And we see that actually at end stage, basically heart failure, right? The heart gets super swell, it gets super enlarged, and the variability almost disappears. We see in healthy people, especially more trained, more recovered, they actually have more of this fine scale variability. So if we were to put you in a chair, just hanging out, resting, breathing at a set rate, and we monitor your heart rate, it could be 68.7, 71.2, 70.0, 69.7, 69.3. It's going to oscillate around this average number. And those little oscillations are that fine scale variability. So, what's going on in the system, the main driver of most of that is actually on the parasympathetic side, which gets a little confusing. So if we go back and we look at the heart and we go, okay, how is the heart, how does it beat? What is dictating that? There's a little bit of cells in the upper chamber, the atrium, called the SA node, the sinoatrial node. And if you take the heart and you take it out of the body and you put it in the lab and you reanimate it, which the University of Minnesota Visible Heart Lab has done, and you just start it. You just zap it and let it beat on its own in the lab. They run a clear perfusate through it. And they can put cameras and all sorts of cool stuff in there. But if you just do that alone, because it's ex vivo, it's outside of the body, the heart rate is actually at a rate of 100. So those little cells in the SA node are going at a rate of 100. But if we could magically stick it back in the body, the main nerve that innervates the SA node is the vagus nerve. The vagus, we call the wandering nerve. When it's doing that, it's innervating those SA node, and it's actually decreasing the rate of firing due to changes in ions in the channels and all this stuff. So most of the time when you are at rest, you're actually under this vagal stimulation. So if you go back to our car analogy, you actually have your foot on the brake. You're trying to slow down this kind of very fast idling car all the time. And the more vagal stimulation you have, the lower your heart rate is going to be. So they're going to be more on the parasympathetic side. So the fastest way to get to a rate of 100 is people would think, oh, that's got to be this massive sympathetic output or just jamming on the gas pedal of the car. That's one way, but that's actually a little bit slower. The fastest way to get to a rate of 100 is to literally just pull your foot off the brake immediately. So with the draw, this vagal tone, and your heart rate will immediately go up to a rate of 100. So the example I then give, if you want to go beyond that, now you have to look at, okay, what is the main system of stimulating the heart to higher heart rates? And that's primarily through adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, these compounds that are released into the bloodstream from the adrenal glands, these little fluffy things that hang out on top of the kidneys. The example I use is if you've ever had, like you've almost had a car accident, but you just missed it. A car comes and you swerve and you get out of the way and you're pulled over on the side of the shoulder. Your heart rate during that time, paradoxically, is not super high. It'll hit 100 really fast, and then it'll slowly go up. But you're sitting on the side of the road, and all of a sudden you feel like, wham, you feel like your heart rate going super fast now. It's delayed by a couple seconds, actually. And that's because the adrenal glands have to put out adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, has to flow through the bloodstream, has to bind to receptor on the heart. Basically, it's an antagonism, agonist. It's a beta 1, beta 2 agonist, and it causes the heart rate to increase. And so those are two different mechanisms. The reason that's super important is because if you get super far down in the weeds on heart rate variability, while yes, you are looking at this balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic, what you're really looking at is how well that vagal nerve is innervating that SA node and how much parasympathetic control you have, because it is
Right.
literally able to adjust your heart rate within milliseconds. Very exquisite, fine control because it's innervating right at that same area.
Yeah. And you just said a whole bunch there, and I'm going to try to unpack all that.
Yeah,
But
it gets messy.
just as an overarching point, a lot of people don't realize that your parasympathetic system is very trainable,
Yes.
right? And I know you've been doing some work on extreme temperatures. Maybe since you brought it up as in terms of noradrenaline, why don't you talk a little bit about, and I don't know if you've done this work or not, but what about like cold plunge, norepinephrine, noradrenaline going into the brain? Does that have an effect on your HRV practiced over time, right? So if you're all of a sudden putting that gas pedal and then forcing the body to adapt to something like that, or vice versa, sauna, they both work on heat shock proteins anyway. So what are you finding there? I'm assuming you've done that work.
Yeah. So if we look at the chronic studies on HRV in response to cold and heat, there's not a lot. But if we look at what the mechanisms are going on, I do think that at a global scale, exposing yourself to controlled stressors in different areas that your body can then recover from, I do think it'll make you more robust to those things in the future. So what I've seen anecdotally with clients doing this is their baseline HRV doesn't necessarily always get better. Sometimes it can with sauna in people who have a low aerobic fitness level. I think that might be an aerobic benefit from sauna. But what I have seen is that if normally their HRV was a little bit more oscillatory each day, meaning they're having a harder time recovering from stressors, their HRV day to day kinds of flatten out a little bit more. It just looks like they don't have as much of these swings from parasympathetic to sympathetic back and forth. I just think they're better able to absorb different stressors outside of even cold and hot. If you go and look at the physiology, so cold's super fascinating. depending upon what aspect of cold you look at will have a different response. So let's say you're a nut job like I am, and you've got a 15.6 cubic inch freezer in your garage you sealed and put 38 degrees water in and want to fit
Right.
in there up into your neck. Right. So if I go in there, the second I go in there, the second that cold water actually hits the sympathetic nerve endings just on your skin, that actually triggers a massive sympathetic response. So that's going
Right.
to be a dump of adrenaline, noradrenaline, epinephrine, which is why when you get out, that's one of the reasons you feel really good. Dopamine may or may not be released. That's a little bit debatable. So just sitting there without face exposure, that's a sympathetic response. So what I train people to do, and you're probably similar, is okay, we want to train you to get in. And how fast can we get your breathing under control? Can we try to take this sympathetic stressor and make you into more of a parasympathetic state? So I think what you're doing is you're training your body at literally a physiologic level to be better able to handle different stressors. What's
Yeah.
interesting then is if you go even further, so if you're just hanging out in there, nice short nasal breathing, nice whatever breathing tempo you want to use, nice and relaxed, get back out. Now, if you get into exposure in the face, that gets even a little bit different. So cold water on the front part of the face initially can trigger a gas reflex. So if you've ever seen and watched someone, even just skin exposure can do this, right? If you watch someone drop through the ice or do the polar plunge or whatever, you'll see their head pop up and they'll be like, you'll see them like have that gas reflex, which is hardwired. When I was looking at the research for the course I did, I was surprised that there's like 20% of people on initial exposure to cold water, like a plane goes down, they fall out of a boat, whatever, like actually drown within like minutes. And at first
Mhm.
I thought, oh, maybe it's like they get exposed to cold water, they just shiver. It was a temperature response, which it's not. It wasn't hypothermia. It was the fact that they had a gas reflex and their head was in the
Swallow.
water and they
Yeah.
actually literally inhaled water and drowned. You're like,
Makes
oh,
sense.
oh shit. So initial exposure, especially in the face area or to the skin, will cause a gas reflex, which is very sympathetic. Now it gets confusing because there's something called mammalian dive reflex. So now if I decide to do, let's say, free diving and I get my face exposed and I'm holding my breath for a longer period of time, the body then does this massive shift the other direction and goes, uh-oh, we're underwater. We have to hold our breath. We want to conserve as much as possible. So what you'll see with that is you'll see a massive parasympathetic increase. Heart rate will go down really low. So like in free divers where they've measured resting heart rates, or even when they're free diving, they can get their heart rate like ridiculously low. And part of that is that mammalian dive reflex that says, uh-oh, we can't breathe. We're underwater. Our face is all exposed. We have to hold our breath. So now we have no choice but to try to be as conservative as possible. And so that'll swing you actually the other direction if it's for a longer period of time. Last caveat with that, you don't ever want to do any like Wim Hof, like hyperventilation beforehand, because if you're breathing, so what freedivers would do is they'll breathe really fast in and out, and then they'll do a dive. Unfortunately, you have a very high risk of having a shallow water blackout potentially at some point, because that hyperventilation at the surface, you're off gassing so much CO2. You can definitely hold your breath a lot longer underwater, which is why some free divers would do it. But you've just taken your safety zone, that kind of need, that urge to breathe, and just squashed it. Because those circuits get changed, you can go from, oh, I feel fine to like, whoop, like just like completely black out. And that obviously is very bad if you don't have someone there to rescue you.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, a bunch said here. So you brought up Wim Hof. I did Wim Hof's whole course about
Nice.
3 years ago. I'm only a mile away from a Russian banyu. So they have,
Oh, perfect. That's
I
great.
get the water 40s.
Yeah.
I get the on a about 220. It's serious, that place. So
Yeah.
all this stuff is very relevant. I was able to practice this stuff. And I definitely felt, and I still feel tremendous benefit.
I agree.
But I wanted to, again, just unpack some of the things you said there. In terms of, you mentioned a lot about breathing. And one of my biggest things that I've harped on for years and years I've done more seminars on breathing than anything else. But you mentioned like assuming that everybody knows how important breathing is for your parasympathetic nervous system. I think people don't. And one of the things that I harp on most is breathing through your nose. If you're snoring it, you have to
Hmm.
keep your mouth. There's benefits of the nitric oxide through your parasinuses. Can you say a little bit about that? I'm not sure if you're really up to date on the research on all that stuff there, but I certainly on the breathing aspect, I know you are.
Yeah. So in general, I'm a big fan of nasal breathing. The caveat being, what are you trying to do? Right. So if you are trying to do an all out max 2K effort on the rower or some heinously horrible Metcon or whatever, and you've been doing it for a while, yes, you're going to breathe in and out of your mouth. Right. Because at some
Right.
point, your limiter is literally just air exchange. We can argue if that's oxygen, carbon dioxide, whatever. But I agree at lower intensities, I like people, Brian McKenzie has talked about this too, Rob
Right.
Wilson, breathing in and out of your nose. And I like their scale that they use. If it's low to moderate intensity, breathe in and out of your nose, maybe breathe in and out of your nose a little faster, then breathe into your nose, out through your mouth, and then mouth in, mouth out. Similar with that rest, like we're having this conversation, you're trying to sleep, you're at low levels of intensity. There's no need for you to really breathe in and out of your mouth. There's a good book called Jaws. Obviously, Breathe is a great book too.
Yep.
He's got
Talks
some
about
great
the whole
stuff.
facial construction, right?
Yeah, James Nestor. Yeah, and I've unfortunately I remember 4 years ago I was at a conference and someone's, yeah, do you tape your mouth at night? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And
Right.
I made the mistake of googling mouth taping at the time, and oh my god, there was like hostage style like duct tape every which way, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm like, that's one that sounds like a horrible idea because if you're so tuned to breathing in and out of your mouth and now you can't, you're going to wake up and just lose your shit in the middle of the night. And so I didn't do it for
Right.
a while because of that. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I just took a piece of the 3M tape and just put it vertically. And then I'm like, okay, if I have to breathe, I can easily open my mouth and override the tape. So my goal was to see how many nights I can sleep all the way through and still have the tape in the morning. If I did, that's
Yeah.
probably a pretty good indicator I'm breathing more through my nose. And similar to you, like I've used that with a lot of clients now. And anecdotally, a lot of snoring goes away, breathing's better, HRV scores are better, aura scores are normally better. Most people in general are actually much better doing that, especially at rest and lower level intensities.
Absolutely. I would venture to guess I have recommended this because one of the things I'll ask clients is obviously I'll ask them a lot of questions about sleep, but if they snore, and obviously you tell somebody to tape their mouth, obviously they make products now. They actually,
Yeah.
their intuition. So, right, they have the tape, and then there's actually a small hole here. So, if you need to breathe through your mouth, it keeps the moisture in the mouth, but it still forces you to breathe more nasally.
Mm.
They all report, those that do it, that they sleep better than they ever have.
Yeah.
And one of the things I tell people is, look, at first you're going to feel uncomfortable with the tape on your mouth, but once you start breathing through, your nose actually opens up.
Yes.
That whole pathway starts to open. And again, nitric oxide being a vasodilator and much of your parasinuses converts nitric oxide there. That whole pathway starts to open, which kind of leads us to our next point here on HRV is if you were to assign a triage of what is the most important thing for HRV, I'm assuming, or and just probably overall health, I'm assuming sleep would certainly be in your top two or three.
Yeah, so someone came to me and said, "Okay, you're in charge of the HRV Olympics, and let's not care about performance or anything else or what HRV quote unquote means. Your job is to take a bunch of people and train them to get the highest possible HRV, right?" So I look at that as like a couple things. Can we do things that if this is your natural baseline, there's probably a bunch of stuff you're doing now that are having you register well below your baseline. Right. So with that, sleep is probably number one. If people get good quality sleep, they're going to get to whatever their natural baseline is pretty fast. Nutrition, obviously, nutrient density matters. Caloric intake matters. Being in a massive caloric deficit is a big stressor. Like good or bad, it's just a stressor. That's just how your body is wired. External stresses, how you respond, breathing patterns. After that, if you say, okay, we got all those, they're all good, they're solid, everything, all the basics are well and good. You're not brutalizing yourself in the gym too bad. Your lifestyle isn't super stressful. And you said, okay, now we got this person to good baseline. They're not doing things that are eroding their HRV. Are there things we can do to make their HRV even higher? I would say probably the best one with that is just old school aerobic training. If they have a very low VO2, so the volume of oxygen they can exchange, whatever the maximum of that is, in general, their HRV is going to be a little bit lower.
I hope you enjoyed this short interview here with myself talking about the use of heart rate variability for stress, breathing patterns, aerobic training, and everything else. Big thanks to Thomas Phillips for asking all the great questions here. You can check out more from him at flmarlboro.com. I'll put a link in there. He is at Fit for Life. And if you want more information on how to exactly use heart rate variability, you can check out all the information in my HRV course. Just go to heartratevariability.net for all of the information. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.